Cậu riêng được không bác? Nó rụng đâu là nó biết đó.
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Carolyn Talks, the YouTube channel / podcast where I, your host, film culture critic and journalist Carolyn Hines, speak to film creatives around the world about their work, the industry, and what inspires them. And today I'm very happy to be joined by writer, director, and producer Solara Thanh Bình Đặng to talk about her film Chín, translated into Ripe in English, and it's a Vietnamese language film, and it's about this young woman, Lê, who is having these dreams. I'm gonna call them premonitions about her life changing. And the thing that's changing her life is her father wants her to get married, and she meets this young man, Hui, and he has an offer for her, but is an offer really what she needs? But I'm really interested to talk about this film because it's almost like a surrealist fantasy in a way, and kind of almost a fairy tale. It has like fairy tale elements, I think, as well. But first of all, thank you so much, Solara, for joining me today. Yay.
Awesome. Thank you, Carolyn. And I first of all have to compliment your pronunciation. I'm really impressed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Usually I like to start my interviews by asking my guests, tell me a bit about how they got involved with the film industry and what inspired you to become a filmmaker.
Okay, I get this question a lot, and I never really know how to answer it because I'm not really the type of I never had like a pivotal moment in my life where I was like, aha, I'm going to be a filmmaker or I'm going to make movies. For me, it was very gradual. I did go to school at UBC, the University of British Columbia, for film studies. And that probably was like the root of my, like, the seeds of my interest in film. And I was exposed to like just the world of cinema through that program. And from there, I worked my way into the Vancouver indie film industry and actually started off as a camera assistant. And I think it was only when I graduated that I took my shot at directing my first film, and it was in the middle of COVID. So we like only had 5 people as our crew and like made this little short with whatever I could find in my home and with a tiny little budget, and whatever like equipment my friends could lend to me. And that was like my first filmmaking experience. To go from that and see now, like we are working with like an international cast and crew. I was able to shoot Ripe in Vietnam, my mother country, with like I think our team had like 60 people on it. To go from that, it's been such a journey. And yeah.
What was the film like? What was the film about? The one you made it at home?
It was actually really inspired by Wong Kar-wai. And it's about a girl who copes with her recent breakup by eating away her feelings through cans of lychee.
Lychees.
Yeah, and so I actually realized that like fruit has been a really like consistent theme throughout my films, and I
Yeah, what do you
hope they
think that is?
continue to be.
What do you think that is? Is it because like fruit and food in particular is so prevalent in Vietnamese culture and so like I would say Southeast East Asian culture
I
particularly?
I think so, and like probably like subconsciously that's how I like see the world through. Like I'm a very like I don't know, my experience is so rooted in like the natural world, and I love fruit because I think they create like a very unique like visual, and different fruits remind me of like different things. And I think food itself is so special because it can evoke like different memories, core and like long-term memories in our experiences. And food is like a way of like relating to other people through sitting down and eating meals. And I think food is a great way to explore themes in films.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense to me, not only because I love food and I love how filmmakers use food in cinema, because and this is something discussed often with other filmmakers as well, is how especially in a lot of different cultures, especially in Asian and Caribbean cultures where I'm from, like food is very central to our culture, you know, like so much of our conversations happen around food, so much of our festivals is focused around food, you know. But fruit to me is an interesting theme, because when you think about it, fruit is one of the foods that we don't have to make ourselves. We can grow, like plant the seeds and grow them, but like we can just pick the fruit off the tree or the vine that it's grown on and wash it, clean it, and eat it, and it's there. Whereas for a lot of other things that we eat, we have to prepare, put the ingredients together and prepare it and make it ourselves. So fruit, I think, is an interesting way to address like that in a film. And in thinking, this is me being like the overthinker that I am, but lychee and durian, which is the fruit that is the main central theme in this in Ripe, is when you think about it, they have similar appearances, and like they have kind of like a prickly or odd texture on the external, but then when you open it, it's like soft and white. Or well, some durian is yellow too on the inside. So I was just like, my brain just went there. My brain was like, I can see the similarities.
No, you're totally right, and maybe there's something to analyze on like what is my gravitation towards different fruits. For me, at least with the durian, I felt like it really evoked like a woman's body,
Mm.
like that really like soft, fleshy, meaty interior, contrasted by this like very tough, hard outer shell. And the fruit itself is like everything about the durian's like lifespan to me is incredibly poetic, and there's so many layers. Some of the things I learned while doing my research about durian and spending time on durian farms while I was writing this script was one that durian flowers are actually bisexual. So
Mm.
they're just like they're cross-pollinated through like natural brushing of the pollen across flowers. And the durian fruit itself, when it's ripe and it naturally ripens, it falls only at night and
Oh,
only on its own. Yeah.
so is that the way how it's harvested? The farmers have to wait until they drop to harvest them, and like because if they try to pick it, it's gonna is that means that they're taking out a time and it's not like completely ripe, which is something that is said in the film. Like it's like maybe it's not completely ripe. So is that how it's harvested? People have to wait until they fall.
That's how it would naturally be harvested, but these days, because there's more, I guess, for lack of a better word, like industrial or like larger scale farming happening, farmers will actually harvest the durian like slightly before it's ripe. They'll like cut it at the stem, but it will continue to ripen like off the stem, as it's being like shipped to wherever it will be exported or sold.
And this is actually something was I wanted to ask you about, because the thing that I remember, because durian don't grow in the Caribbean, right? Like we don't, even though we have like similar temperate climates to Southeast Asia, like the trees just don't grow there. So all of my, and I've never eaten it, but one of the but I remember like growing up when I was young in Barbados and watching like films and TV shows from like across Asia and stuff, and then just like watching like documentaries and stuff. I remember distinctly there was like this whole thing in the 90s and I would say early 2000s where people would talk about like people want to eat durian, and like and like the way you have to ship it is very careful because it has like a really strong smell that is compared to like rotting flesh or decomposing flesh. And that is a memory, a very specific core memory that I have of like durian growing up. But it's been really interesting to me within, I would say, the last 5 years, particularly, which I think is so interesting and weird, how like we're seeing so much mentions of durian in North American and specifically American culture, and that's so fascinating to me. And the thing that fascinates me about that is that no one ever actually mentions the smell. Like and which I think people talk about the texture, but because it has like like for instance, like Lana Condor, she's in a film called Worth the Wait. And like in the film, there's a scene where she's in this market in I believe it's Singapore or Malaysia. I think it's Singapore. And she talks about it having like a weird texture, custard texture. And the reason I remember that is I remember reading an interview where she said like that was literally her very first time in real life actually eating durian. So the scene in the film is her trying it for the first time. And I just thought it was fascinating that no one ever actually mentions the smell now. Whereas growing up, that was what people always talked about during the smell. And so I want you to talk a bit about that, because to me, that's just such a fascinating, I think, change in like the discussion, how people address this fruit, and not just fruit. I think about how Asian foods and cultures are being kind of assimilated into North American culture media, but not given full context in their entirety. For instance, matcha is this big thing now, but people aren't really talking about how this big explosion of matcha trends in like tea and ice creams and lattes and all this stuff is actually creating an issue for Japanese people. That's a different discussion, but it's just kind of similar to me, like how you get this discussion of these products coming out of Asia, but we still don't get the full context discussing them. That was kind of a bit of a long thing, but yeah.
No, I totally see where you're going, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because that was something that I really wanted to explore with the durian, was this idea in my mind, as I understood it, that the durian has always been seen, like, at least in the West, as like this kind of like exotic and like controversial fruit. People either love it or hate it, and the fruit itself is like heavily regulated in travel, even in Asia, because like smell is universal, right? Like we all smell things, and regardless of whoever you are, it's undeniable that the durian smell is very distinct. And some people say it's like rotting flesh. Other people will describe it more as like a natural gas leak. I personally, like, I actually really like the smell, and I think it's because I grew up with it. So I love the smell and I love the taste. And I have a lot of friends who feel the same too. But I also know a lot of Vietnamese people who don't really like durian, because it's a fruit that has a huge presence. Like it has a strong smell, as it has like a very imposing presence. Like fruits can be huge and like they're very spiky. They can be dangerous. Like there's a small statistic of people who will like be injured or even pass away because of a durian falling on their head in Southeast Asia. Um, and the flesh itself is like very meaty. It is custardy, like you mentioned, and like packed with flavor. It's very rich. So as a fruit, it brings a lot to the table. And for me, that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to connect it to like the female body and the female experience, because that itself is something very rich and complex and has a huge presence, but can be misunderstood and like has a very like complicated role in like the world, right? And that's something like I wanted to explore with the film, and really like inspired me with everything. But I think it's great that you mentioned, you know, how durian and like other Eastern fruits or like food products have been, I guess, like portrayed or assimilated within like Western culture. Because I do think like slowly there is like an acceptance, um, and I guess like an overcoming of maybe like the original like exoticization or orientalization of different foods. And maybe it's late in the game, but I think it can be good. But like you said, to a certain point, especially in this like incredibly capitalist world we live in, it can lead to overconsumption. And then it leads to like the exploitation of people. But that that relationship itself, I think, is something that we should all be like thinking about too. And it relates back to our like our own experiences as humans in this world that we have created for ourselves.
Yeah, because one of the things that bothers me is like, yes, it's like things like durian and matcha and like nasi goreng, which is Indomie. Like I love Indomie noodles and stuff, and like these East Asian and Southeast Asian and even Caribbean foods talking about oxtail. becoming like very commercialized
or trendy.
Into like white, not only American or North American, but particularly white consciousness is one of the things that bothers me is that yes, we appreciate our foods, appreciate our culture, but then the thing is like they try to divorce these things from the cultures. You know, there's no discussion of what these things mean to us culturally, you know, what they mean to our countries, you know, what they mean to our global economies. And like, as you mentioned, like overconsumption is that's like in trying to meet these demands, like this, like the people in the local communities are being stressed, the environments are being stressed. Farmers, like for instance, you mentioned farmers have to, the production is becoming more commercialized, which means that they have to, in order to meet the demand, they're picking these fruits before they're ready to be fully, before they're ready to be fully harvested, you know, and like that actually puts the stress on the trees, and eventually it's going to have a ripple cascading effect. And I think in a way your film kind of addresses that, because there's a scene where Lei she's having this discussion with her father, and like this is in the middle of the film. And I know it seems kind of weird to jump into discussing a film in a scene that takes place in the middle, but I think that scene in particular kind of encapsulates the entire film, because she's talking, she brings this durian to her dad, and it's yellow, so which it looks ripe, it looks like fully, like it's fully ready to be eaten, and but it tastes off to her. She's like, it doesn't taste fully ripe, and to him, he's like, it seems fine. But then he's like, but then she's like, maybe it's not fully ready to be harvested, you know, and to me, I kind of saw that as speaking not only to like the culture being opened up, but maybe at a time it's not fully ready to be fully seen, but also for her as a woman, she's being told to do this thing, to get married at a time when she's not ready to be married, you know. She's being told to open up and expose herself, like shed her prickly layer, so to speak, and expose her softness to someone who might not fully appreciate where she is at this point in time. So I'm gonna start talking about the film there. It's a weird place, but I kind of think it kind of fits with what we're discussing, because it is about vulnerability and opening up to being examined and being basically in a manner of speaking consumed by this would-be suitor.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up, and I really appreciate your interpretation of that that scene. It really, really resonates with me and like what I was thinking about when I was writing and making the film. And I wanted to like call back really quickly to what you mentioned about fruits being special as a food, because it's something that we can like pick directly from plants and trees and bushes and just eat it right off of where they come from. And for me, that like that connection to nature and the land is so important in the film. And there are a lot of like factors that enter Leia's world that start to like make it so that it's harder for her to have that connection. But that connection is like those are her roots, and that's her strength. And that's where her like values and her intuition come from as a human, and as a woman. And that's one of the layers that I'm trying to like, I guess, like pick apart at through the film.
Yeah, and I think to me, like I really get that in the film, because you're really talking about how young women are expected to just jump into relationships with complete strangers simply because our elders tell us to. You know, like there's no, like her dad doesn't even ask her if she's ready. He's like, you know, I want you to prepare for your future. And that means going to meet with a marriage what am I just, it's not a marriage counselor. Why am I blanking on the term?
Like a marriage broker or a matchmaker.
Right, a marriage broker, a matchmaker. And I'm like, Dad, how did you get from there to there like that? Right, you know, he's like saying, oh, you know what, you know, maybe we should like look at yourself financially, because like I could be injured. Because the film starts out with a Durian falling and hitting him on his head, and instead of that being a like bulb moment of like this aha moment, it's like he's like instead of saying, you know what, maybe I should make sure that I have things financially secure for Lei, should I pass on, you know? And he's like, no, oh, but you go get married. I was like, really? That's how you're gonna jump into this. And like for him, the idea of securing her future is getting married to someone she doesn't even know, you know. and he's expecting her just to expose herself, offer herself like a fruit on a platter to someone that he doesn't even know, and that let alone she does, right? So talk to me about that, like about the durian falling on his head not being a aha moment of like clarity, but kind of like she inferred it where she's like, instead of it making a moment of clarity, it's like it's almost like it muddled up his sense of thinking. Like he's not thinking logically after that.
Yeah, there's a lot to parcel out there, I think. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. My first point I'd like to address is perhaps for me, like that scene for me represents, like, at the beginning of the film, Baz disconnect, or the father's disconnect from, like, the land, because there is like a significance to that durian falling on his head, and there's a potential, like, maybe spiritual meaning or like a message from the land that he could interpret from that, but he rejects it at first. And that has something to do with, like, maybe his rejection of, like, the connection with the land that he has, which is really important throughout the film, and is something that Lê herself draws strength on, which kind of creates a contrast between the two characters. Another thing is, like, it sort of is a call for me to the environmental precarity of the Mekong Delta, where most of the durian farms are. Um, the Mekong Delta has a very sensitive ecosystem, and due to climate change, it's becoming very sensitive, and it's been harder and harder for farmers to make a living out of the land that they work. And part of Baz's decision, I think, to encourage Lê to pursue this arranged marriage is so that, like, she can secure her future. And in his eyes, like, it might be a very limited point of view, but in his eyes, that's the only way that she can, I guess, like, pull herself out of this situation, because he fears that they might not be able to work the land much longer.
Yeah, and I understood his fear in that, but it was, for me, it was just like, and like his jump into marriage, of course, is something that we've seen throughout human history, where young girls are told to enter into arranged marriages to strangers, and usually it's an idea presented just almost out of the blue, where it's like, you're reaching a certain age, perhaps you should get married, we'll go and call like a marriage broker, a marriage matchmaker. And for me personally, I actually don't have a problem with matchmakers or marriage brokers. I'm like, yeah, I'll take a lot of the guesswork out, so that once you meet a certain amount of people, then your thing. But it's just the way it's presented, where it's like her future is tied to the idea of marriage. Like securing your future means getting married, instead of looking at financial security, instead of maybe figuring out what does she want to do. Does she want to keep working on the farm? Does she go and work in the city? Like what is he doesn't ask her what her future is. He doesn't ask her what her idea of securing her future is like. He just automatically ties it to marriage. And that's where I'm just like, Dad.
Yeah, I get it. And that's totally a reflection of, like, a lot of values, especially in Vietnamese culture. It's still, like, very much tied to, like, traditional expectations and ideals of filial piety. And I wanted to, like, present that idea, and also weave ways in which, like, Lê could see herself moving through, like, these constrictions that she has in her life, like these expectations and these limitations as a young woman in Vietnam, and coming from the place that she does, um, how she can, like, find her own agency and sort of carve her own path. And I think that's where I wanted to explore if she could find that strength and that freedom.
And here's where I want us to talk a little bit about the characters and actually their names, because I looked it up. And so the character of Lê, who's our female lead, she's played by Hayley Ngọc, and her would-be suitor Hui is played by Samuel An. But I looked up their names because as we were discussing before, like Vietnamese names all have very specific and particular meanings. And so like the name Lay is actually bisexual. So both either men or female could have it. And it's also a name that works either as a last name or as a given first name, as we say. And it's a name that means two things. One is plum, so a fruit. And then the other name is also attached to meanings of intelligence, or even royalty. And then the name Hui for the male character, I thought it was interesting. His name means filial piety, and you just mentioned it. You mentioned filial piety. So talk to me about the significance of the names for these characters and what they are also conveying about the story and like your intent with using them.
I love the detective work you did there because you just caught like an Easter egg that I was putting into the film. Like the names for me were definitely very important. Les name was very key because, yeah, like you said, there are several meanings to that name. And it can be a name used for any gender. But also another meaning for Le is actually tears. And it for me it evokes like a sort of like a bit of a sadness, but it also is a reflection of like Vietnamese culture because for a lot of Vietnamese families it can be seen as like auspicious to name your child a name that maybe isn't like the most showy or the most like beautiful and extravagant because it's like it's something humbling. And so I think that like choice of naming Le, something that like giving her a name that it comes from a more humble and grounded place is kind of a reflection of where she comes from. Whereas Hugh's name, like you said, it does mean like it has meanings of like loyalty, filial piety, um, and that's kind of like a reflection of like where he comes from like a place of privilege and expectation and a very like masculine place.
And that's kind of how they're presented visually. Like the costume designer, you and your costume designer did, I thought was very interesting. Like for Lei, like for the almost like the majority of the film, she's in natural colors, neutral colors, like where when she meets Hui, like she's wearing like this light colored linen shirt and a dark bottom pants, which kind of to me kind of symbolize the earth, as you said, like the nature and like the earth and all of these things is very a significant theme in the film. And so that comes through in Les clothing. It shows that she's of the earth, she's very down to earth, as we'd say, but it's also like she's connected to her ancestry and to like nature and to like to even to the farming that her father does. Whereas for Huey, when we first see him, he's dressed up in a suit and like a fedora, and it's gray. It's like this grayish black suit. And when he walks up and he just turns up at her house in a white car, like he instead of a steed, instead of a horse, instead of a white horse, he drives up in a white car. Like he's like this knight in shining armor coming to rescue this damsel in distress and say, "I'm gonna take you to a better future." And I'm like, she don't even know you. But like he's coming up in his shades, and I could kind of see a bit of like the Wong Kar Wai reference in the way he's introduced, like the slow-mo, like he takes off his glasses. It gave me a very 80s, 90s Hong Kong aesthetic. I'll tell you that. Like, I got that. I'm like, dude, you're in the wrong film. That was what I was thinking. I was like, you should be in a Hong Kong accent, like rolling up here, taking off your shades, all dramatic, like. But like I just said, like that comes through in like in their presentation, like she's more of the earth, she's nature, she's more open, she's very clear and very concise about what she believes and knows who she is, where he's coming up, putting on a facade, and trying to impress her and like and she clocks that immediately because she looks at him, looks at the picture of his parents and says, you got money, but she's not impressed by it. So talk to me about just that with the working with a costume designer and like figuring out how they would look and how these characters would be presented on screen that tell us who they are without like really telling us who they are.
Yeah, I think you really captured it yourself already. There was a lot of intention behind Les wardrobing being a reflection of where she comes from. It's very down to earth, simple clothes that a young woman who lives on a farm would wear. Very like earth toned colors representing her like her groundedness and her rootedness to where she comes from. But also like there were some choices in like the shirts that I wanted to make, and I worked together with my stylist to choose them. And that like some of the shirts were a little more like mature and feminine as a way of kind of showing like Le might have actually borrowed some of the clothes that her mother left behind after she passed. And that was a detail I had considered in their family dynamic that you don't
Mhm.
even need to know as an audience member, but it was something that we thought about. And Hugh's wardrobe was very much inspired by like what uh what like a suave individual might wear. And I was actually like looking at a lot of like Japanese like yakuza and like
Yes.
gangster outfits to get inspo and also get that fit, that very like vintage 90s fit. And I love that you bring up like he looks like he would come from a Hong Kong like action film. I would love to direct one of those one day.
Well, one
Big
day.
fan of that genre of films. Um, but yeah, the wardrobing is really important because it also like helps with the performance of the actors too. If they feel like they're their character and they feel like what they're wearing like embodies them, then it brings out a really good performance too.
Yeah, and they talk about the embodying like the only time that we don't see uh Lay in clothing that is her own, like she's wearing like she's taking the picture for the profile for the marriage broker, and she's in this blue ball gown, fancy ball gown that almost made me think of like almost like a quinceañera gown or like a graduation gown. And it's like, Dad, why is she wearing this for a matchmaking thing, you know? And but it's about him having her present a facade of something she's not. But then what I thought was an interesting detail is her shoes. When she stands up, I noticed that the shoes she's wearing are too small, you know, and like there are these silver slippers again, kind of like giving me, this is where a lot of the film kind of gives me a fairy tale Cinderella feel. And then she wears them in that scene, and then the scene where she's walking through the Durian farm with Hui, is Hugh. I keep saying Hui, but it's Hugh, right?
It's Hugh, yeah.
It's Hugh. And
Yeah.
I keep saying Hui. I don't know because I'm looking at the spelling. But when she's walking through the farm with him, I notice she's wearing the silver shoes. And these are shoes that are too small and clearly uncomfortable. Talk to me about that. Cause I was like, cause I kind of read it as like she she is who she is as she's meeting him, but there's just one small thing about it that shows she's uncomfortable with this situation, and it's these shoes. These shoes are that she some are things that she wouldn't wear naturally and that she wore for this picture.
Yeah, so I like that you brought up the I guess for lack of a better term, the blue prom dress in her matchmaker photo. I was actually inspired by a like a photo shoot or like a photo set that I had seen, and it was from a Korean photographer. I believe her name is Oh Sun-hwa, and she had done a photo series in the Mekong Delta. Um, Photographing young Vietnamese women of the Mekong Delta um, before they were like moving on to like the next stage in their lives. And these women were all like in different forms of like prom dresses. And the photo shoot is titled, I believe, Quiet Dream. And it was something that like really stuck to me because in my mind, I always saw that like these women in the Mekong Delta that I was like inspired by to write this film about all have this quiet dream. Whether it's like finding success in their own personal businesses or you know, finding a marriage, a happy marriage, either abroad or maybe in the city and like, you know, kind of getting out is whatever that dream is, every woman holds that. And every woman has to make some kind of big choice or sacrifice before they leap into that next step. And I was like just struck by like the innocence, the vulnerability, but also the strength of like these young women in these like Western dresses looking entirely like out of place in these like the lush jungle settings of the Mekong Delta. And I wanted to bring that to the screen through Le's photos as well, because it's a representation of her own quiet dream, and also how she's trying to fit into these expectations and figure out how she wants to move through them like on her own terms at the same time. So that's on that dress. As for the shoes, I don't know like if I even have an answer for that. That might have been like it's one of those things where like I would love to just have an like a talented viewer like you come up with your own understanding, because the shoes could mean a lot, and her outfit in that last scene could mean a lot. And I don't want to, I guess, like influence that idea too much.
I know that you want to leave it open to interpretation, right? Which I love. Like, there's always something like that every audience member individually can read into it, and take something away from that different from it differently. And I want to talk about dreams, because again, that's something that is another theme in the film. There's discussions of dreams and premonitions, as I call them, and this whole idea of dreams and reality being not that much different. Like in one of her dreams, like Leia is having a discussion with her mom under a Durian tree, and the mom says she doesn't see dreams and reality as being different. Talk to me about that aspect of the film, and like if you had any discussions with Hayley about that particular aspect of the film, and like developing who Leia would be, like a character who sits in both the dream and reality, and she kind of sits in between them.
Yeah, that was really important to me, and I think it's a testament to the strength of like Le's character and how she connects to like the spiritual and natural world. And I find like in Vietnam that like whatever you might believe in, that like doorway to the other realm is like it's a lot thinner in certain places in the world. And I find whenever I go back to Asia, it's always thinner there. And maybe it's because like the more people believe in something, the stronger that thing gets. Maybe it has something to do with that. Maybe it has to do with like a very rich and long history in the country. But regardless, I think it is a strength, and it's a reflection of like one's connection to the world and their history and where they come from. And so for Le to sit in between this like, I guess like spiritual or dream world, however you want to interpret it, and reality, for me, it's like that feels like something I wanted to celebrate. And very much like for me, like that's how I see the world. I love to approach like reality from a more like magical realist standpoint. Just makes life more easy to understand and accept, and also more playful to move through than seeing things as like black and white and real or not real. But it's also a celebration of Vietnamese culture, because we are a very like superstitious and spiritual people, and that's not a bad thing. But it can also be a very like heavy thing as well. And for Le, the ability to connect with these two worlds does weigh on her, while it's also a strength for her.
And what kind of conversations did you have with like Hayley and Samuel about their characters? Because that's the other thing too about their clothing, like and just the way they talk, like the way that Hayley speaks as Lay, like I said she's very matter of fact, and she's very concise in what she says. Like I get the sense she's someone like she wastes no words, like she thinks about what she wants to say and she says it, and then that's it. Because when she's talking with them, her manner is completely different to when she's talking to her family. When she's talking, almost all of her conversations with her father, and when she talks about what her aunt says, is like very much about the spiritual aspect. Is very much about dreams, again, nature, culture, missing her mother, honoring her mother, like you talking about the cigarette. But when she's talking to with Hugh, like she is talking very much, she's talking about wealth, how he presents himself, you know, and like checking him immediately and saying like, I see you as a poser, like saying, why would I want, but why should I marry someone that I don't know? Why do you want me to lie to my family just to please you, just to cover, for you to basically, excuse my language, cover your own ass with your own family, you know? So like there's a very clear difference in how you structured the dialogue between the characters, and how she speaks to Hugh versus how she speaks to her family. So like what were like the discussions you had with Hayley and Samuel about their discussions, you know, and like how their language is very, I think very particular and very specific.
Yeah, I think for Les' character with Hayley, we worked a lot on just like exercises where Hayley was visualizing a lot of like things related to home, like anything that reminded her of being at home, feeling safe, and grounded. We did things like visualizations and also like even like physical breathing exercises and grounding exercises to get her really like fully embodying that sense of like when she's at the durian farm, this is her territory in many ways. So that's really important for Liz character, and I think it's a reflection of like that dynamic, that contrast between Le and Hugh is this tension of like someone from the outside coming in. And it shows that contrast of like Le being comfortable at home. Like this is her world. The durian farm is her place and her realm. And Hugh is the one who's a foreigner stepping into it. And there is this like tension between who's inside and who's outside. And Hugh comes in with like this, I guess, like urban swagger, and it's just like a collision of two different worlds. And so I guess the way they speak can be like an extension of that.
Yeah, because he comes in with a lot of arrogance, thinking that she's gonna automatically agree with him. And like he's believing, he in his mind is thinking, this idea that I have is genius. Like this girl, there's no way this girl is gonna turn me down, you know? Like he shows her the picture of his parents. He's like, these are my parents. And I think my mother would like you, like, your mother doesn't even know her. What are you talking about? You know, and then he's like thinking she's gonna agree because he thinks that she's gonna agree to please a mother that she's never met, you know, a woman she's never met. And I thought it was really interesting because like this is something that is still very prevalent, where like men think that women are just gonna automatically agree with their ideas and their thoughts and, you know, their politics and their beliefs simply because they're coming from a man, you know, and just like thinking that you are the greatest thing ever. And I'm like, no, sir, you are not. Stop it. And I thought that was really funny because like that whole situation between them, it was just like, this dude, really, my guy.
Yeah, and power plays a really important role in those dynamics, right? And I was like really trying to explore power in their relationship because they both hold something that the other wants or needs.
Yeah, she has the power to say either yes or no. And he, in a sense, does have wealth, you know, does have in a sense of security, but it's just like she has to decide like what is my yes, my assent to this worth, you know, like because there is no, she doesn't know who he is, you know, she like can't like he doesn't even propose that they date for a specific amount of time before getting married. He just say, let's go get married like immediately, which I thought was hilarious. But in talking about that and also in the dialogue of the film, and I think the visual of the film works with that. Like you make an interesting choice with the film, the visual of the film, the cinematography. Again, like to me, the film has almost like this fairy tale kind of like dreamlike quality, but also very aged quality because like it's shot on film. I think I saw on like the Vancouver website that you use Kodak. Did you use like actual film strips, or was it digital?
Yeah, we shot on 16 millimeter and it was thanks to Kodak.
And so what was it like filming on Kodak for a film like this? Because and it's not like crystal clear. And I love that the film has texture because you see these little white scratches that you see with old film reels. And like, again, to me, that's what adds to the visual of the film and the dreamlike quality. I think your cinematographer is Shannon Chotraguj. Talk to me about figuring out like the cinematography for the film, because you have to to me, cinematography for a film filmed on actual film reels is going to require something different than digital, because you have to think very carefully about how it's going to look in the finished product with in post-production and editing.
Yeah, so our cinematographer Chana played a huge role in helping us achieve the really beautiful, lush look that we have in Ripe. And she's just like, she's a genius. Like, she was checking every shot and the lighting, and she used a camera to take photos of her lighting setups in order to understand how it would expose on the film before we shot on film, because we only had a certain amount of rolls that we could work with. And it's daunting to work with film. You can literally hear your money running through the camera.
Yeah.
And we did shoot some slow-mo scenes, which were particularly challenging because slow motion, first of all, needs more light. Um, and so Chana had to light those really properly, but also it just runs through the film even faster.
And one of the last questions I want to ask you is about the money, and making the choice to shoot on film, because it's gonna be more expensive, right? Than shooting on digital. What was it like for you to have to go through the process of deciding, do I want to film on film, or do I want to film on digital and then in post-production give me that vintage feel? Because the film would look drastically different if it was filmed on digital and then editing and post-production to get that vintage feel. What was it like for you as not only the director and the creator, but the producer? Because as a producer, you got to consider the money, and all of these things, and like that could affect your creativity.
Yeah, so to be honest, the choice to shoot this on film was really easy to come to, because I was like, yeah, I want to shoot on film. That's it. Like, that was the choice. I think it has always been a dream of mine to have the resources to shoot on film. And thankfully, because we got support to make this film through the Canada Council of the Arts, we were able to justify shooting on film. And for me, it wasn't just like a financial choice. It was definitely like an artistic one and a visual one and a process one too. There's just no denying that shooting on film looks different. And I don't think this film would have looked the way it looked if we had shot on digital and even tried to adjust things in post.
Yeah.
And even the flaws that you see on the film, I embrace them because they're kind of, um, I guess like an artifact of shooting in Vietnam, because some of the dust you see is actually like literal grime from the water in Vietnam that was used in the lab to wash the film. So in a way, there's like this almost like poetic physical conversation happening between the film and our world processing it. But also, like, I really was excited to work with film because I saw it as a challenge for me as a filmmaker who has only ever shot on digital. When you feel like so comfortable on digital to just like call action, call cut, do as many takes as you need to get that right performance. But the contrast with working on film is that you have to like be really precious almost with every time you roll the camera and you take a take. And so it made us as a crew work so much better with each other because we took everything so seriously, and like every time we rolled a take that it was precious. Our actors were rehearsing very seriously. We spent so much time in rehearsals just to help Hayley and Sam get to the point of like understanding with their characters. But it was also like I could see it trickle down with all of our different heads of departments, production team, sound, wardrobe, camera, lighting. Everyone was like just focused and on their A game because they knew that like we just couldn't afford to, oh, roll on the rehearsal, or oh, let's take this for safety, because we just didn't have that luxury with shooting on the amount of rolls that we had, and on the budget that we had. And I loved that challenge.
In considering all of that, like how you like it made the time of filming more precious to you, how did that make you appreciate Vietnam and filming in Vietnam, and especially in the Durian Grove, to be more precise? Because like we at the beginning we talked about the like how in the environment in Vietnam is changing and how the environment changed, the environmental impact of everything happening with climate change and all this is affecting even just this one part of Vietnamese culture and industry. And because that is something that is discussed in the film, time and effort and nature and like reading and understanding nature and appreciating it. Like how did making this film perhaps change your perception of Vietnam that you had before, but change your perception of Vietnam, not only as a Vietnamese Canadian woman, but as a filmmaker making a film about Vietnam?
Yeah, wow. There's so much I could say to that question, and my mind goes to so many places. I think, first of all, like the most beautiful experience I had was just working with the Vietnamese crew and in Vietnamese, like in my language. That just felt really good, like for my body and my spirit. But I think it was just like the whole process of shooting in Vietnam was like a testament to the like resilience of Vietnamese people. Like we really overcame a lot of obstacles to shoot on like very like awkward and complex durian terrain because it's not like a typical, I guess, like monocrop farm. It's very like uneven and there's ditches, like water ditches right next to the durian trees to aid with the moisture of the soil. So we were working on like very weird, bumpy and awkward terrain and like where cars couldn't even access. So we had to use like scooters and like trolleys to carry all of our equipment everywhere. And so just seeing like how hard everyone on the crew worked and how passionate everyone was like so special to me. But in terms of like the film and like shooting it in that setting, it was also special because like I had never seen a durian farm being captured in any kind of film before. I've seen it like maybe on people's phones or like a little brief video of like a durian farm tour on YouTube, but I had never seen it used as a setting in a cinematic sense. And for me, I was like, oh, this is kind of a way also of like preserving this beautiful part of our culture.
Yeah, and I think it does. Because it made me think of back home in Barbados, like being here in Canada, there is no orchards that I can just casually walk through. Like and to me the durian trees kind of made me think of like mango trees back home and like breadfruit. I don't know if breadfruit grows in Vietnam, but there's a fruit called breadfruit and it kind of looks similar to durian, like it grows really big and stuff. And watching the film kind of made me think of that, like like I living in Canada and in North America, especially in an urban landscape like where we are. You're in Vancouver and I'm in Toronto, but it kind of made me think of like being able to just casually walk through nature is such a treasure and I think a privilege that we don't realize until we're outside of it, especially if you're away for it for a really long time. And so I love films like this that they make me miss home, but then it also makes me appreciate the just like how nature is healing. Like one of the things that I one of the first things I was doing to go back home is go to the beach, my favorite beach. But it's also just about, like you said, like it's paying homage to that and capturing it and showing like even this place, these archers, these are cinematic in and of themselves. They're beautiful, they're worthy to be captured on screen and on film. And you show it in all of these, that the word you use, lush, is correct. And like lush does go back with the word right, in that sense. But it shows like the foliage is thick, like you can, me again coming from a place where I've been in similar environments, I could hear the crickets. I could picture hearing the crickets at night, and the little frogs, or we call them there's crickets, and then there's like the lizards and then the bugs. And even though you may hate the bugs, you still kind of appreciate them because that reminds you that nature is still thriving. And your film kind of gave me that sense. And that's why I love those scenes where Lei is just walking through the orchard and the grove with her mom and then by herself. Even the scene with with Hugh, like is still like about enjoying that environment and showing that it can be appreciated in a cinematic sense.
Yeah, you put it beautifully.
Thank you. But we'll wrap here. But thank you so much for taking the time for speaking with me, Solara. I wish we could have met in person. But maybe one day. And then maybe one day we'll get to meet in Vietnam and attend the film festival there in Ho Chi Minh City. But thank you so much for taking the time for speaking with me about this film and sharing a bit more about Vietnamese culture and about your work. And congratulations to you and the entire cast and crew. I think you're making a beautiful film. And much success to you and everyone.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It was such a pleasure to speak with you, and I loved all of the insights that you brought to our chat today.
Thank you so much. Oh, one thing I did want to ask you is it occurred to me, I had it in my notes, but I forgot. So I noticed there's an inversion in the parents. So for Lei, she has her dad and her mother died, and for him it's like if I'm remembering correctly, for Hugh, his father died and his mother is alive.
Yeah, and he has his mother. Yeah,
he has his mother, right? So I thought it was an interesting inversion, so because they showed that even in that they're not similar. You know, even in that way, they don't even have a similarity. Like there's still differences.
yeah. I think with that, like, you could maybe see it as like they have they're kind of opposites in that way, but it's also like begs the question of like maybe it's like how a puzzle piece might fit together too, when like one part is missing and the other is where it fits in. That's something I was thinking about.
Yeah, like even at least there's that one thing they have in common, the loss of a parent. So maybe that's where they could begin a relationship. Maybe. I thought about it, I wrote it, and then I forgot. But thanks for answering that for me. Thank you so much.
You asked such wonderful questions.
Thank you. I try to be as like deep and thoughtful as I possibly can, and I'm also just a super curious person. Like I even had questions about like the aunt's name, because I even looked up the meaning of the aunt's name, which I got like the meaning is gentle and thoughtful. Is one of some of the meanings for the aunt's name. So I was just like, oh. And the dad's name isn't mentioned. He's just called Pat. So which is dad in the thing. So I thought it was interesting to there's 3 characters with names: Lei, Hugh, and her aunt. Everyone else just kind of like is this as a thing, as a person.
Yeah.